It is the top of the hour, so I am going to get us underway. The subject of today's training is going to be creating a level loading menu, and we're going to use a little bit of the new UI system to do that. So it's going to be a combination of a little bit of new stuff in that we're going to be using the UI system, and then a little bit of stuff that, if you're a more advanced user, is probably going to be somewhat familiar. We're going to be talking about loading scenes, but we're going to go through all the different methods for loading scenes, including loading a scene directly, loading additively, loading asynchronously. And so it should be pretty cool. All right, so let us get going. All right, so you guys should be seeing Unity now. We've got a blank project with the 3D defaults. You could actually use the 2D defaults as well, because we're going to be pretty much entirely in the UI system. There's going to be a tiny little bit of few 3D things in here, but it's going to be pretty much UI and scripting focused. And so what I've got here is I've imported the sample assets beta package, which you can find on the asset store by searching for sample assets beta. If you want to follow along step by step, I suggest you grab that now. Really, we're going to be using this in kind of a cosmetic way. You can totally just follow along without it, but if you want to make your scene look the way mine is going to, then that will be helpful. And so I am going to just start with a little cosmetic stuff. We're going to just set up a little skybox. I'm going to go to Edit, Render Settings, and over here under Skybox Material, I'm going to select from the sample assets this Sky Moonshine skybox. Totally cosmetic, not necessary, but just to make this look nice since we're going to be looking at it for the next hour or so. And so what we're going to do is we're going to build out, using this as a background, a little level selection menu. And we're going to go through some of the different ways that you can load scenes from a menu in that process. So let's start by creating our title text for our imaginary game. So we're going to go to Game Object, UI, Text. And when we create that, you'll notice that a canvas object has been created and an event system object. The canvas is going to hold all of our UI elements, and the event system is what's going to allow us to trigger scripts from the UI. And we're going to do some of that in this. So let's start. We're going to call this Night Sky, which is going to be the name of our pretend game here. And we're going to change the text to Night Sky as well. Let's go all caps. I'm going to set the size to be pretty big. Let's go 72. Notice when I size it up, it disappears. That is because the horizontal and vertical overflows are set to wrap and truncate. We're going to go ahead and set those to overflow and overflow so that it appears. It's still pretty hard to read because it's gray. So let's go down to color, and we're going to set it to a nice sort of pale blue kind of color. Now I am going to just go ahead and move this into position. Let's go over to the scene view, and I'm actually going to switch my scene to 2D to do this. We will zoom out, and we're just going to grab, we've currently got our UI tool selected, and we're just going to grab this night sky, and we'll just slide it over a little bit so it's on this side of the screen. That's -324 if you want to go by the numbers. And this is just going to be a kind of a cosmetic label here. Let me just look at the chat, make sure everybody's okay. Oh yes, thank you for asking. I'm using Unity 4.6 beta because I'm using the UI system. You can expect 4.6 to be coming out of beta very soon. But yeah, I'm still using the beta, and you'll need that to follow along. So sorry I wasn't more clear about that in the beginning. Okay, although, you know, the scene loading stuff doesn't matter what platform we're using. I'm just using the 4.6 beta features, the UI features, to create the menu. So we've got our kind of scene label, our game title. Let's now add our first interactive element, which is going to be a button, which is going to allow us to load our first scene. So I'm going to go back to Game Object, UI, and in this case, I'm going to create a button. Now, I'm just going to copy the text component from our night sky just so I can match basically the color is the only real thing here. And I'm going to go to my button. Let's label it. We're going to call it level 1 button. And then as a child of level 1 button, there's a text object. So when we create a button, it comes with some text. It's got this shape, and then there's a text inside it, and we're going to use that text. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste component as new. Paste component values on the text just to make it the right color and everything. And then we'll change the text to be level 1, and I'll set the size to maybe 36. And next, let's move this into position. So we'll go back to our scene, and I'm just going to grab the button, right, not the text, and let's just move it up and just kind of drop it there under our night sky. Now, you can see the button is not quite the right size for the text anymore, so let's go ahead and adjust that a little bit. Let's make it maybe 150 by 50, and then we'll just tighten it up a little there. I'm not going to worry too much about making this perfect. And so that's pretty good. So in this case, we're going to use this button sort of rounded rectangle as the clickable area for this. And actually, we should probably make it a little bit, maybe not 50 height. Maybe let's make it 40. There we go. Just tighter on the text. And the reason for that is because we're going to make this button invisible. We're going to go in here to the color field of the image script, and we're going to set the alpha to transparent. We don't want to turn the component off because we actually want to use that rectangle for the click zone, but we don't want to render it just because it's, looks nicer without it. Okay. So that is the kind of cosmetic element. Now we need to add some interactivity. And so what we're going to do next is we're going to create a script that when we click on level 1 is going to load another scene. So in our assets folder, let's just create a folder called scripts. And in there, we're going to create a C# script called load on click. And we will open it up in MonoDevelop. All right. And so this is going to be really simple. What we're going to do here, we can actually delete our start and our update. We are going to have a public function that returns void called load scene. And in it, what we're going to do, and this is going to take a load scene is going to take a parameter of the type int called level, and that is going to be the index of the level in the build settings, which we'll talk about, that we are going to load. So within that function, we're going to call Application.LoadLevel and pass in level. So Application.LoadLevel is what we're going to use to load scenes in Unity, and the parameter that it takes level is going to be the index in the build settings of the level that we want to load. And I'll show you the build settings now. So let's save that. So super simple script. And what we're going to do is we're going to add that to our canvas because we're going to be using it for a couple of our buttons potentially, and it's fairly generic. So we're going to add it to our canvas, and so that theoretically if we wanted to take this whole canvas and make a prefab out of it, we would have all the scripts at the top level and it would be nice and organized. Okay, so important to note that that was a public function, that it returned void, and that it had a parameter of the type int. This is important because when we want to use the event system for the UI system, in order to detect that function and to use it here, it needs to meet those criteria. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a function to the onClick list here for our button, and by clicking the plus button here, and then we're going to drag in the object that has it attached. So in this case, our canvas. When we do that, we're going to be able to now choose from the available functions on our object. So in this case, we've got the game object, the rect transform canvas, graphic raycaster. These are all standard things that would be a part of a UI object. But then we also have here our load on click, which is the script that we wrote. If we look through it, we will see that we have this load scene function that takes an int. So we are going to choose that. And now this is the int parameter that we're going to pass into the function. I'm going to set it to 1. And I'll show you why I'm going to do that. The reason I'm going to do that is because we are going to make another scene in a moment, and we're going to add it to the build settings here. And the build settings, as you can see, when we loaded the sample assets, it's actually added a bunch of sample scenes to our build settings. So here we have this AI jet plane at 0, AI propeller plane at 1, and so on, all the way up through number 18. We're not going to use any of these, so I'm going to do Command A on a Mac or Control A on a PC, and then hit delete to clear those out of the build settings because we're going to be adding our own. While we're at it, I might as well add, actually I need to save my current scene. Let's do that real quick. I'm going to save the scene that I'm working on, and I'm going to call it main. And then let's make a scenes folder to put it in. And we'll drop this into our scenes folder. There we go. And now we're going to make a new scene, which is the scene that we're going to load. So I'm going to go File, New Scene. And in here, this is just basically going to be an empty scene. I'm just going to create a UI element, a UI text that is just going to say, Level 1 was loaded. And we'll set the color to white so we can read it. And that's all I'm going to do. Save it. Now we'll call this Level 1. Hit Save. Move it into our scenes folder. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add it to the build settings. So we're going to go File, Build Settings, Add Current. Now, I'm just doing this because I have it open. We could also just go into our scenes and drag in. Let's drag main in as well. And I'm going to drag them to reorder them. I'm going to put main at position 0. This is going to be the first scene that's going to load when our build of our application is launched, which makes sense because it's our menu. And then we're going to move into whatever scene we want to choose based on our menu selection. So let's close that up. Let's go back to main. And now if we play our scene and click on level 1, we can see level 1 was loaded, right? And you can see that it did it very quickly. Because this is an empty scene, it's almost instantaneous. You know, it took like a frame. And so that's great for simple scenes, but we may also have a situation where we're going to load, let's say we're loading up the main scene for our full game. That's probably going to take at least a few frames, or maybe a second or two, so or more depending on the complexity, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to create a second level that's going to kind of replicate that kind of a situation. So I'm going to make a scene that's going to be intentionally full of stuff so that it can take a moment to load. So I'm going to go to Sample. I'm going to make a new file, New Scene, and then I'm going to go to Sample Assets, Prototyping, Prefabs. You could just do this with a bunch of spheres if you want to. Just make lots and lots of spheres. I'm going to go to Compound Prefabs, and I'm going to take, where is it? This elevated track, and drop it into the scene. I'm in 2D mode still. That's totally fine. I'm going to drop that in, and then I'm just going to duplicate it and move it up. And we'll just do a few of these. I'm just going to select these both, duplicate again. This is just going to be total baloney here, but it's just going to be something that's we're going to use to slow Unity down a little bit so that it can demonstrate. Let's move these along the Z-axis or Z-axis if you're British. Move them out of the way, do it again. That should do okay. So I'm going to hit save. We're going to call this level 2, and I'm sorry, I'm hitting save by pressing Command S on a Mac or Control S on a PC. Of course, you can go File, Save Scene as well, and that's going to be saved into Assets. We'll grab level 2 and drop it in our Scenes folder as well. And let's add this to our build settings. So open up File, Build Settings, and hit Add Current. Very good. Okay, let's go back to main. And here now, let's add our second button. And I'm just going to duplicate the first button, Command D or Control D to do that. And then we're going to say level 2, but we're going to call this level 2 button. And the text will be level 2 text. I should relabel level 1 as well. Always label your stuff, guys. Level 1 text. Okay. Now, level 2 button is going to be, all we need to change now is the index number, right? So I'm highlighting level 2 button, and then I'm just going to change the scene number that we're going to load to 2. That's basically all we need to do. Now let's just test it before we do anything else. And let me actually move this down. I'm going to highlight level 2 button and position Y. Oh, and of course I need to change the actual text here. We'll change this to level 2. All right, hit play. And now when we click on level 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah. So you can see, you know, 3, 4, 5 seconds of loading time. Not an instantaneous transition. Look at this beautiful scene. It's amazing. Forgot to put a light in there. So that is okay, right? But we don't really want our user to click on something and then nothing happens, and like, did I click it? And they click it again and they get confused, right? So we want to give them a little bit of instant feedback that they clicked something. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add a still image loading screen. So next, we're going to add just a still graphic that says loading before it actually changes scene. So in our hierarchy, we're going to add a game object of the type UI, an image, and what we're going to do is we're going to click on the anchor presets here, and we're going to Option or Alt click in the lower right-hand corner. What this is going to do is stretch to fit this image to our screen. Boop. And I'm going to change the color and make it black. All right. Now we just need a little piece of text. Now, one thing that's worth noting here, right? If you haven't worked with the UI system a lot yet, the order of the things in the hierarchy matters. So right now the image is below. So we've got night sky, the text, and then the buttons, and then the image is below them. That means it's going to be rendered in front of them. So if I deactivate the image, we can now see the text. And if I reactivate it, we can't, right? So keep in mind the order here matters, and you can reorder them by dragging them if you want to. I'm going to add another text object. So we're going to go UI text. We're going to call this loading, and actually let's call this loading image. And this will be loading text. And we're going to child the loading text to the loading image, and that is so that when we deactivate the loading image, the loading text will deactivate with it. Next, we're going to, actually, we'll just copy the style from our level 1 text. So we're just going to copy component and paste component values. We will call this loading ... and we're going to click on our anchor presets and option click on the middle one here to center it. Now, I'm option clicking because I'm going to set the position and the pivot at the same time. As you can see here, Shift also set pivot. I'm sorry, Alt also set position. Click. Okay, there we go. Very nice. And that should be good. So what we're going to do next is we're going to allow our load on click script to turn that loading image on and off. So I'm actually going to turn it off to start with, and then we're going to turn it on when we click on it. So let's go back to MonoDevelop to load on click, and we're going to add a public game object called loading image. And then in here, in our load scene function, we're just going to say loading image dot set active true. So we're basically it's currently false, right? It's disabled. And so when we click to load the next level, we're going to set that loading image to true so that it'll block out the scene as we load and let the player know that we're loading. Let's save that and jump back to the editor. And what we're going to do here is we're going to this is already attached to canvas, right? So we're going to go to canvas, and then we're going to drag in a reference to the loading image game object. So we're going to grab our loading image, boop, and drop it in there. And then let's just give this a quick test, and then I'll take a look at the chat. So we click level 2, loading. And there we go. So very nice, right? Much more pleasant than just kind of click and hang and you don't know what happened, giving the user some feedback that they've done something correctly and they're on their way to the next level. So we've seen how to load a level, how to load a level with a little intermediate loading screen. So when we load one scene into another, what happens is before the next scene is loaded, all of the stuff in the hierarchy is destroyed to clear out the scene and make way for the new scene, right? Now, most of the time that's what we want. We want a blank slate. We want to just load what's in our scene, right? But there may be cases where you might want something to continue from one scene to another. That could be a UI element, maybe some audio, maybe a game manager object, something like that. And so we're going to look at how to do that using Don't.DestroyOnLoad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little background music to this, and we're going to have that play through the loading transition. So we're going to go game object, create empty, and I'm going to call this background music. And we're going to add a component of the type audio source. And the way that I did that, right, you can just type in the name. If you type audio S, it'll bring up the audio source. I just had it in there from before. And next, we are going to play on awake, should be checked. We're also going to check loop. Then I have an audio file here, which is just a little piece of music that I wrote. You can add any music or sound that you want to add just to test. We will set it to be not a 3D sound, right? Because we don't want it to change its volume based on its distance to the camera. We want it to just play at a consistent volume. So we're going to turn off 3D sound, hit apply, and then go to our background music object and drag it into the audio clip slot. Now, when we play our scene, and let me actually turn it down a little bit because it's loud. We'll set the volume to 0.5, which will be half, and give it a listen. Okay, so we got our kind of moody background music here, which is very good. And next, we are going to, so if we play the scene right now and we go to level 1, burp, the music stops, right? Which maybe we want, but maybe we don't. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to script. We're going to create a new C# script, and we're going to call it Don't Destroy. This is going to be another super simple script. We're going to open it up in MonoDevelop by double-clicking, and we can delete update, so we're not going to use it. And I'm going to change start to awake. Awake is called before start. It doesn't really matter in this case. And we're going to say don't destroy onload, and the target is going to be game object, right? This game object. So now when we load another scene, this will persist and not be destroyed, or whatever this is attached to, right? So let's save that, jump back to the editor. We'll take don't destroy, add it to our background music object by dragging and dropping. And now reload, get to our new scene, and our music is continuing. So very nice. Okay, what happens when you come back to the menu scene? Yeah, if you came back to the menu scene and didn't destroy, for example, the background music, you would have two background music objects. Yeah, because it would load one from the scene and the other one would be not destroyed. So yeah, you would need to manage that. How would you fix something with the double music? Well, actually, the next thing that we're going to look at is something that you could potentially use for that. So the next function that I want to show you guys is one called onLevelWasLoaded. And what that does is after a scene has been loaded, it is going to run whatever code you want it to run. So So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's check if we're in level 2, and then we'll play a different piece of music. We'll change the music that's playing. So let's go to Create, C# script, and we'll call it Change Music. And open it up. And then here, we're going to have a public audio clip called, let's call it Level 2 Music. And then we're going to have a private audio source, which we will call Source. In Start, I'm just going to make it awake again. This is just kind of a habit for me these days. Blip, awake. We're going to get a component reference to our audio source. So we're going to say source equals get component audio source. And so what this means is it's just going to look for an audio source attached to this game object that the script is attached to, and it's going to use that source for the other stuff that we're going to do. We can delete update. We're not going to use it. What we are going to do is let's just add a space there, try to make our code look nice. Next we're going to call void or declare void on level was loaded. And this takes a parameter of the type int called level, which is going to correspond to the level index in the build settings. So we're going to say void on level was loaded if level is equal to 2 source.clip. We'll use some brackets here. Yes, source.clip, because we're going to do 2 lines. Source.clip equals level 2 music. So if the current level index is equal to 2, so if we're in level 2, if level 2 is the level that was just loaded, we're going to set the audio clip of our audio source to our level 2 music clip that we defined that we've dragged in the editor, in the inspector, and then we're going to say source.play. So we're going to play that clip. All right. Let's save that. Also nice and simple, right? I just wanted to show on level was loaded. This is something that you can use for all kinds of things. You know, anytime you're loading a level and maybe you're not sure from what level you came from before, you can kind of manage the game state and load things and so on. So pretty useful. Okay, we're going to take change music and add it to background music. And we're going to drag in our different audio file for our level 2 music. Next, that ought to be good to go. So let's give it a try. We'll play. So we've got our background music playing, and now when we go to level 2, oh, and I forgot to set it to be a 3D sound. So there we go. Let's set that. It's going to be a 2D sound. That's why I got quieter, right? Because it was the distance between the camera and the audio source, which we want to ignore by setting it to be a 2D sound. Okay, so then the question was, okay, let me just look at the chat. Okay, yeah, the double music. So let's see. Neofen says, destroy the sound object at the end of the level. Yeah, or better yet, just have an object which will persist. Yeah, what I would probably do is actually before I would have a launcher scene that is before my menu where things like the background music object would be instantiated, a scene that I never return to. And that would help me to avoid that problem. So I wouldn't put the background music in the menu if I knew I was going to go back to the menu. Like in this case, there's no way to get back to the menu from any of the levels, which is not very realistic, right? But so I would just put like a pre-scene, you know, set everything up and then launch the menu from there. That's probably how I would do it. Marrow Salad, the question is, why are games that I make can only be played on Unity and not launched like another game with a folder and launch the application? That is because you need to go File, Build Settings, make sure you're set to PC, Mac, and Linux standalone, and hit Build. And for your target platform, whatever platform that is, that'll build an application file, an exe file, and then you can launch that as you would. Let's see. Yes, you could add the audio source from the script as well. That could also be nice. Yeah, exactly. You could have like a first, or you could even just have like a black scene that isn't loading, that just quickly loads up whether it's your game manager, your music manager, sound manager, any of that stuff, just loads it up and gets it ready to go. All right, so let's continue. So there are, so we got don't destroy unload, onLevel was loaded. What we're going to look at next is loading scenes additively, right? So we saw everything we've been using so far destroys most of the stuff, if not all of it, and then and then loads in the new stuff. What we can do by loading scenes additively is we can just add the stuff from one scene into another. So let's go ahead and we will duplicate our level 2 button. We'll move it down, and I'm going to, let's change the text. This will be level 3. This is inaccurate because it's not actually a level, but I'm not going to change it. We're just going to add something to our menu. Level 3. And we want to make sure, right, that this is above, not there. We want to make sure, let's pull this down, actually. Oh, don't do that. Derp. There we go. We want to make sure that level 3 is above loading image, right? So it gets blocked out when we pop up our loading image. Okay. So here what we're going to do is we are going to write another script, another tiny script, create C# script in our scripts folder. This will be called load additive. And open it up. And here it's going to be really similar, actually. We're going to say void, we'll call this load add on click. It's got to be public, right? And here we're going to do Application.LoadLevelAdditive. And in this case, it's going to take int level. And let's also, okay, that should be good. Hit save. And let's put that in our canvas, on our canvas. And level 3 is going to now trigger the load on click function of load additive. And we're going to pass in scene 3, which we haven't made yet. Let's make that now. So save this scene, make a new scene, and in our sample assets, we've got some, no, not you. I want effects, particle systems, prefabs, fireworks. Toss them in. And I'm going to move them maybe 30 units away. Let's make it -30, I think is what I wanted. Away from the camera. Nope, maybe it was +30. There we go. Pew, pew. Beautiful fireworks. Now, this is going to be loaded additively, right? So it's important that we get rid of the main camera because it has an audio listener. And if we have 2 audio listeners in the scene, it's going to throw an error. So command delete on Mac or the delete key on PC. Hit save. This will be called level 3. And it's going to go in scenes. And let's add it to our build settings. Build settings, add current. Very good. Go back to main, and we should be able to give it a test. Now, if we click on level 3, beautiful fireworks. So we can see, right, nothing was destroyed. The fireworks were just added to the scene, and note that they were added in the same position as they would have been in their own scene, right? So they're at Z30, and the camera was in the same place, right? So worth thinking about as you're loading stuff in. The scenes do need to line up with each other in terms of position and so on, if you want them to fit together. All right, very good. So please show all scripts. I will. Okay, here, I'll show them while I'm talking. Here's load additive. I'll change it in a sec. Let me just take a look. Here's change music. Yes, Wingsoft wants to know, can you please show how to make a loading bar? I can and I will. I will do that now. Let's keep it moving. So, okay, now this, I'm going to make a bunch of you sad because this is a pro-only feature. The way that I'm going to do this, there might be some kind of creative other way that you could figure out to do it, but what I'm going to show is a pro-only feature because we're going to use Application.LoadLevel async. So what this means is we're going to load the level asynchronously, meaning we're going to load it in the background while the current scene is still running. And that's going to allow us to do things like show animation of our loading bar as we do that. And let me just really quickly open up my notes. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add we'll add a loading bar to our loading image. So we're going to create a new UI element, which is going to be a slider. And we're going to move it into position. Let's actually we'll get the rect transform dupe of this and paste it to here. Boop. Not bad, and then move it down. Oh, actually, sorry, wrong one. I want to child this to my loading image, not my thingamabob, not my title text. I'm going to get this, copy component, paste component values, and then we'll just move it down, doop, 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 and we'll make the width a little wider. You know, we're not going to be too precious about this. 170, something like that. Derp. All right. I know that little bit of drives me crazy too. I try not to be so perfectionist in these things, but that like slight wrongness just really bugs me. All right. Pretty good. Okay. So this is a UI slider, and we can use it it can be interactable. We're going to actually make this not interactable. We're going to turn off the interactable button so the user can't click it and grab it, but you could use it that way if you wanted to. We're just going to use it as a display for our loading. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the handle slide area, so it just looks more like a little rectangle, and then the fill area, we'll make it blue as well. Just going to kind of eyeball the color there. That's close enough. All right. And let's set the value to default to 0. This really doesn't matter because the script will do it, but just for, I don't know why. There we go. Okay. So we're going to need a new script to do this, which is going to have a few more lines to it than some of the other scripts we've done. And we're going to make it in our scripts folder, C# script. This is going to be called click to load async. And open it up. Now, the first thing that we're going to need to add to this is the namespace declaration using Unity Engine.UI, because we're going to use slider, which is a member of the Unity Engine.UI namespace. So we're going to make a public slider called loading bar, and a public game object called loading image. And then we're going to have a private async operation. This is we're going to be using the load level async function, which returns an async operation. We're going to call this async. And next, what we're going to do is we are going to have a public, let's make two, no, not abstract. We're going to have a public void click to load, we'll call it, oh, I already used let's call it click async. And this is again going to take an int, a parameter of the type int called level, and just give it a little space as well. And first of all, we're just going to say loading image dot set active true, just like we did before, right? So we're going to pull up our loading image, which is going to include now our slider. And what we're going to do next is we're going to start a coroutine. So we're going to say start coroutine load level with bar, and we're going to pass in the parameter level. Now we don't have that coroutine yet, so let's write it. And so this is going to return an IEnumerator, as all coroutines do in C#. And this is going to be, we're going to say load level with bar and pass in the int level again. And in here, we're going to say async, our async variable that we declared earlier, async is equal to Application.LoadLevel async and pass in level. So we're going to call Application.LoadLevelAsync, which is going to return an async operation. And so we're going to use that to check whether the operation is done and also to check the progress. And we're going to do that in a while loop. So we're going to say while not async dot is done. So async dot is done is a Boolean, which will evaluate to true when the level is done loading in the background. And then we are going to, inside the loop, we're going to say loading bar dot value, which is how we set the value of, or set or get the value of our slider, is equal to async dot progress, which is another parameter of load level async, which is a float between 0 and 1, and which just so happens is the range of our slider. And so we're going to set it to that, and that is going to measure how far along the progress of the load level async is. And then we are going to yield return null because we're in a coroutine, and this is going to cause us to wait for a frame before we reevaluate the expression. So we can delete these. That should be good, hopefully. Save, jump back to the editor, and then we're going to drop this also on the canvas. And we'll replace, and then we're going to drag in our loading bar and our loading image. So the loading image is here, and the loading bar is our slider, which we should label loading bar, and let's give it a test. Oh, and of course we need to turn the loading image back off. And then let's just make sure, actually, sorry, level 3 needs to be switched. So I'm sorry, not level 3, level 2 is still using load on click. So now we're going to change it to click to load async and click async and pass in, yes, level 2. So let's try that. Ta-da! All right, so yes, unfortunately, a Pro-only feature, but maybe a good reason for you to invest in Pro. And this can be used for a lot of things, like if you have heavy levels that are going to take a long time to load, you could kind of start to load them maybe before you got to the title screen. You know, if you knew it was like your main scene and you wanted to buy yourself a little time, you could show your splash screens or your title screens while it's loading. So that then when they get to actually load that level, it'll go straight in. And yeah, let me look at the chat, see how everybody's doing. And that is our show for today. Thank you guys all for coming. I'm going to hang out and answer some questions, but hopefully you found that helpful and or interesting. So you can do a static loading screen in Unity free, but if you want animation to be playing while it's loading, you're going to need to use async, which is currently only in Unity Pro, yes. How can I script a drawing brush on get button down? Wow. You know what I would use is I would use a trail renderer, I think. You could attach a trail renderer component and turn it on via script when you get button down. I'm a 13-year-old trying to learn how to script. Any suggestions? I would just say check out the tutorials on the Learn site. Walk through those, and then just walk through Unity tutorials that use scripting. And even if you're just kind of copying out scripts or trying to tweak existing scripts, I learned a lot doing that. Yeah, a lot of games use simple loading swirly thing. You could totally use that depending on the platform that you're on. You could use, like, I know iOS has its own loading thing. I think Android has one too. If you're on a mobile device, you could totally do that. Any tips on organizing menus for use in gameplay versus main menu information? No, I am not a UX designer. I do not. Organizing menus is, I think the thing about organizing menus, especially in a game, right, where people are going to do those things many, many times, is you want them to be fast, and you want commonly used things to not be through like 4 submenus. That's your UX tip for the day from me. Show all scripts. Yes, thank you for the reminder. Let's go back to the beginning. Load on click. Very simple. Jolly American. Yeah, strongly recommend that you collaborate. I've learned a lot of stuff by collaborating with people. You always see people do different things, and people have different strength areas and stuff. You know, even if you're both programmers or both artists or whatever, it's cool to collaborate, and you'll learn a lot. So I strongly recommend that. You check out the collaboration section on the Unity forums, also Twitter. There's Indie Team Up, I think. Yeah. Thanks, Rakuru. Glad to hear that spamming the fireworks button is fun. There's a bunch of cool particle prefabs in there you can have a lot of fun with. 1132. Thanks, man. Thank you. Thanks for coming out. What's the meaning of as in scripting? It's to cast. Here, let me put up another script here. Don't destroy is so simple. Let's put up this one. As is to cast something. So you would say, I want to instantiate this as a transform or as a game object. For example, for the pause menu, there is the new UI live training tutorial that shows how to set up a pause menu, which is scene dependent. Yes, I mean, there is a bunch of material about setting up UI in general. And some of the more granular detail of the UI. This was really kind of top level, simple UI stuff, but I just wanted something to hook it into, you know, so we weren't just like pushing keyboard buttons to load scenes or something. Any further questions? Here, I'll put up a different script. Let's put up load additive next. All these scripts will be up on the archive page. Okay, guys, well, as we're kind of slowing down a little bit here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go off microphone. But I will keep the chat window open. If anybody thinks of any other questions, I will answer them by typing. But thanks again to everybody who came out. It was a lot of fun chatting with you guys. And Adam will be back next week, next Monday at the same time. And he'll be doing the next 2 weeks. And then I will be back in 3 weeks. Cool. Later.